Hi, English students. Today we're going to talk about a concept in creative writing called plot triangle. So in the OER, it discusses how there are different craft features that you can use to help you write a story, a narrative. And there's things like imagery, and you can use figurative language like metaphor and simile to help tell your story, things like setting to help tell your story. Plot is one of those craft elements that you can use to develop your ideas in a story. So if you are assigned a literacy narrative or a memoir essay to write for English 1101, you'll definitely want to consider your plot. So the way in which we can kind of visually analyze plot is through the use of a triangle. So if we draw a triangle that looks somewhat like this, it can help to represent the actions that unfold in a plot. So your plot is the events as they unfold in sequence in the story. In a plot, something has to happen to the protagonist that sets you off on a trajectory, on a journey. So generally when you start off a story, a memoir type story, you might want to begin with some exposition. And then your protagonist, you. What you definitely want to think about as you are developing a memoir story is think about what you as the protagonist wants out of the situation. And then in a plot, what you're going to do is create obstacles or actually describe the obstacles. Because remember, if you are writing a memoir, or a literacy narrative, this would fall under the genre of creative nonfiction. So you definitely want to be telling true events, but so remember those obstacles that you overcame in order to try and get what you want as a protagonist in the story. And so as we climb up this visual and think about your story as something that you could analyze and break down with plot, you're going to have rising action. Or you should try to shoot for creating some rising action that can help to heighten the suspense in the story. So you have different varying obstacles that you're having to overcome in your story, and then you want to reach a climax. And so a lot of times the climax in a story is where something happens and the protagonist is somehow changed. So the protagonist usually undergoes some kind of change. I'm talking generally here, not all stories will follow like a chronological steps. You can also structure your story more linear. But so at the top here, you want the protagonist, to have gone through some heightened suspense and then a point at which you have to somehow change. The change can be internal or external. The external circumstances in a story might remain the same, but at the height of your story, the climax, maybe what happens is the change that occurs is you change the way you think or the way that you feel about a situation. Or you could literally go through an external change where you change the trajectory of your life. So what you want to do when you're creating a memoir and creating plot is you want to think about how you can develop yourself as a character that we're going to sympathize with, and we're going to want to go with you on this journey for however many pages your teacher has assigned. So, plot, we have some exposition where you'll give us potentially some backstory, give us some basic orienting details, and then something happens to spark you on a journey where you're going to somehow change. So after the climax in a story, there's generally some falling action. So potentially, you can take that time to, especially with memoir, maybe you could spend some time reflecting, but you can also reflect throughout. But reflect on that climax, potentially think about how it has sparked you to change, potentially. And then your denouement, right? Your resolution. And so the end result of like, what happens after you've gone through these obstacles and you reach this climax? How do the pieces of the puzzle in your story fall into place at the end of the narrative? So the denouement is also your final outcome in the story. So this is just a visual way to think about how you can develop your plot in a memoir story or a literacy narrative. It helps if you can think ahead of time how you will structure your story. So if you were to outline, potentially think about how is this story going to unfold. Definitely think about how could you create these 5 major pieces in your story. Begin with some exposition, have some rising action. Definitely want to have a climax where the protagonist goes through some change, some falling action. What are the consequences of that change or benefits? And then definitely think about how does this all fall into place at the end? What is the final outcome of your story? So I hope this is helpful, and good luck writing your creative nonfiction stories.